The dust cloud rising behind Dakota Evans's Appaloosa could be seen for miles across the open plains of southeastern Utah Territory. The year was 1878, and while most women were expected to stay at home tending to children in kitchens, Dakota had other ideas. The thundering of hooves matched the beating of her heart as she urged her faithful horse faster across the sun-baked earth. Freedom tasted like the wind in her hair and the grit of desert sand on her lips. "Come on, Tempest!" she shouted, leaning forward in her saddle. The spotted mare responded instantly, stretching her powerful legs into an even faster gallop. Dakota had raised Tempest from a foal, training her with a gentle but firm hand. Together, they'd become legendary in Monticello and throughout San Juan County. In the distance, the modest collection of wooden buildings that made up Monticello came into view. Dakota slowed Tempest to a trot as they approached, patting the mare's sweaty neck. "Good girl," she whispered. The main street was bustling with the usual afternoon activity. The general store's porch hosted the same group of old-timers who spent their days chewing tobacco and spinning yarns about the good old days before women got so headstrong. Dakota tipped her hat politely in their direction, but didn't miss the disapproving glances. At 23, Dakota had long since stopped caring what people thought of her. After losing both her parents to influenza 5 years earlier, she'd taken over their modest ranch outside of town. Against all advice and predictions of failure, she'd not only maintained the property, but expanded it, proving her worth as a rancher despite her gender. She dismounted in front of Willard's general store, tying Tempest to the hitching post. "I'll only be a minute, girl," she promised, fishing in her pocket for a sugar cube. Tempest gratefully accepted the treat, nudging Dakota's shoulder affectionately. Inside the store, Mr. Willard greeted her with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Afternoon, Miss Dakota. Saw that dust trail of yours from a mile away?" "Afternoon, Mr. Willard. Just need some coffee and maybe a bit of that peppermint candy you got in last week." As he gathered her items, the bell above the door jingled. Dakota didn't turn right away, busy counting out coins on the counter. "Well, would you look at that," a deep voice drawled behind her. "The famous Dakota Evans in the flesh." She turned, one hand instinctively moving to rest on her hip near her small revolver. A tall stranger stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the bright afternoon sun. As he stepped forward, she could make out his features, strong jawline partially hidden by a neatly trimmed beard, intense blue eyes that seemed to take her measure in one glance, and a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Don't believe we've met," Dakota replied coolly. He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair. "Remington Quinn," he said, extending a hand. "New foreman at the Thornton place." Dakota shook his hand briefly, noting the calluses that spoke of honest work. "Welcome to Monticello, Mr. Quinn." "Call me Remy, everyone does." His smile widened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "And you would be the woman I've been hearing about since I arrived, the one they say can outride any man in the territory." Dakota raised an eyebrow. "Not just any man, Mr. Quinn. Every man who's challenged me so far." The old-timers on the porch had moved inside, eager to witness this exchange. They chuckled knowingly. "She ain't lying, Quinn," said old Samuel Jenkins. "Seen her outrace the Richardson boys last summer. Beat 'em by half a field length, riding side saddle just to rub salt in the wound." Dakota smiled at the memory. "That was a good day." Remy leaned against the counter, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "I've got a fine Kentucky thoroughbred that might give your horse a run for its money." "Is that a challenge, Mr. Quinn?" Dakota felt a thrill of excitement. It had been months since anyone had dared to race her. "Maybe it is." He straightened up, standing a good head taller than her. "This Sunday, after church, from the old oak at Peterson's Creek to the ridge overlook, winner takes—" "Bragging rights," Dakota finished for him. Remy shook his head slowly. "I was thinking of something more interesting. If I win, you agree to attend the Founders' Day dance with me next month." A murmur ran through the store. Dakota felt heat rise to her cheeks, both from anger at his presumption and something else she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "And if I win?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. He thought for a moment. If you win, I'll break and train that wild Mustang stallion you've been trying to catch on your south pasture. Dakota's eyes widened. She'd been trying to capture that magnificent black stallion for months. How do you know about that? People talk, and I've seen him myself. Beautiful animal. Fine, Dakota said, extending her hand. You've got yourself a race, Mr. Quinn. As they shook on it, the spark of competition between them was palpable. Dakota couldn't help but notice how his hand engulfed hers, warm and strong. Sunday it is then, Remy said, releasing her hand and replacing his hat. Looking forward to it, Miss Evans. He tipped his hat to her and to Mr. Willard, then strode out of the store. Dakota watched him go, his confident walk and broad shoulders disappearing as he mounted a handsome chestnut gelding tied outside. Well, well, Mr. Willard chuckled. Looks like Monticello just got a bit more interesting. Dakota gathered her purchases, trying to appear nonchalant. He's just another cowboy who needs to be taught a lesson about underestimating women. But as she untied Tempest and headed for home, Dakota couldn't stop thinking about Remington Quinn's challenging smile and the race that now lay ahead of her. The ride home gave Dakota time to think. Her ranch, modest compared to some in the area, had been her parents' dream. Now it was her legacy. The whitewashed farmhouse came into view as she crested the last hill, the setting sun casting long shadows across the yard. Her ranch hand, an older man named Hank who had worked for her father, was in the corral working with a young colt. "Evening, Miss Dakota," he called as she rode in. "You're late today." Dakota dismounted, leading Tempest toward the barn. "Got held up in town. We've got a race this Sunday." Hank grinned, his weathered face crinkling. "Another fool thinking he can beat you in Tempest?" "The new foreman from Thornton's place, Remington Quinn." Hank's eyebrows shot up. "Heard about him. Came from Colorado with quite a reputation as a horseman." Dakota paused in removing Tempest's saddle. "What kind of reputation?" "They say he trained horses for the cavalry, and before that he raced in Kentucky. Won some big races back east." A flutter of concern passed through her. She'd beaten local cowboys and ranchers, but never a professional horseman. "Well, Tempest and I have a few tricks of our own." After settling Tempest with fresh hay and water, Dakota headed to the house. The inside was simple but comfortable, with her mother's touches still visible in the handmade quilts and curtains. She prepared a simple dinner, then sat on the porch watching darkness fall over her land. The next few days passed in a blur of ranch work and preparation for the race. Dakota spent extra time with Tempest, running her through their practice course and making sure the mare was in peak condition. By Saturday evening, her confidence had returned. No matter Remy Quinn's reputation, she and Tempest had the home advantage. Sunday morning dawned clear and cool. Dakota dressed with care in her best riding outfit, not the impractical side-saddle skirt she sometimes wore to make a point, but practical split skirts that allowed her to ride properly. She braided her long chestnut hair and tucked it under her hat. She skipped church service, something she rarely did, to give Tempest one final practice run. As the appointed time approached, she rode toward Peterson's Creek, her stomach tight with anticipation. A small crowd had gathered at the starting point. Word of the race had spread through town, and it seemed everyone wanted to witness the contest. Dakota spotted Remy immediately, his tall figure unmistakable as he checked the saddle on his impressive thoroughbred. He looked up as she approached, and his smile caused an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Miss Evans," he greeted her, touching the brim of his hat. "I was beginning to worry you'd changed your mind." "Not a chance, Mr. Quinn," she replied, patting Tempest's neck. "We don't back down from challenges." The thoroughbred was indeed magnificent, a gleaming bay with powerful hindquarters and an aristocratic head. The horse eyed Tempest with interest, letting out a soft, nickering sound. "This is Diablo," Remy said, noticing her appraisal. "Don't let his gentle demeanor fool you. He transforms when the race begins." "Much like his owner?" Dakota couldn't resist asking. Remy laughed, a rich sound that sent a warm current through her. "You'll have to race me to find out." Sheriff Taylor stepped forward to officiate. "All right, folks, you know the course. From this oak to the ridge overlook. First one to reach the old lightning-struck pine at the top wins. Clean race, no interfering with each other's path." He looked between them. "Ready?" They both nodded, moving their horses to the starting line marked by 2 sticks in the ground. Dakota settled into her saddle, leaning forward to whisper to Tempest, "It's just you and me, girl, like always." The sheriff raised his pistol. "On my mark. Get set." The shot cracked through the air. Tempest leaped forward, her powerful legs eating up the ground. Beside them, Diablo matched their pace, his longer stride keeping him even with the Appaloosa. Remy sat his saddle with easy grace, his body moving in perfect rhythm with his horse. The first quarter mile was flat, giving both horses a chance to find their stride. Dakota kept Tempest slightly reined in, knowing the mare's tendency to expend too much energy at the start. Remy seemed to be doing the same with Diablo. As they approached the first gentle slope, Dakota gave Tempest more rein. The mare responded instantly, pulling ahead by half a length. She heard Remy laugh behind her and urge his horse forward. They thundered neck and neck up the hillside, neither gaining a clear advantage. The wind rushed past Dakota's face, and she felt the familiar exhilaration of speed and competition. At the crest of the hill, the trail narrowed between 2 rock formations. Dakota guided Tempest through first, gaining a slight lead as they emerged onto the more challenging part of the course, a winding trail that snaked its way toward the final climb to the ridge. Here, Tempest's experience on this terrain gave them the advantage. The Appaloosa knew exactly how to navigate the turns, barely slowing as she rounded each bend. Dakota risked a glance behind her. Remy and Diablo were close, but Tempest was maintaining her lead. The final stretch loomed ahead, a steep climb to the ridge overlook. This was where many of Dakota's previous challengers had fallen behind. Tempest was a mountain horse at heart, sure-footed and powerful on the ascent. But as they began the climb, Diablo surged forward with unexpected strength. The thoroughbred's breathing was labored but steady as he pulled alongside Tempest. Dakota could see the determination in Remy's face, his hands steady on the reins as he guided his horse up the difficult trail. They crested the ridge together, the final marker just 100 yards ahead. Dakota gave Tempest her head completely, trusting the mare to find her last reserves of speed. Beside them, Diablo stretched out his neck, his powerful stride matching Tempest's quicker pace. The lightning-struck pine grew closer, neither rider willing to concede. In the final moments, Tempest gave a mighty surge forward, crossing the invisible finish line a mere head in front of Diablo. Dakota reined in her horse, turning to see Remy doing the same. Both horses were breathing hard, foam flecking their necks. For a moment, neither rider spoke, catching their own breath. "Congratulations," Remy finally said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. "That was some fine riding." "Thank you," Dakota replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Your Diablo nearly had us at the end." Remy dismounted, moving to check Diablo's legs after the hard run. Dakota did the same, running her hands down Tempest's forelegs to ensure there were no injuries. "A deal's a deal," Remy said, straightening up. "I'll be by your ranch tomorrow to start working on catching that mustang." Dakota looked up at him, surprised. "You're not disappointed?" He shook his head, his eyes holding hers. "How could I be? I just witnessed the finest riding I've seen in years." He paused, a smile tugging at his lips. "Though I admit, I was looking forward to that dance." Something in his gaze made Dakota's heart beat faster than it had during the race. "Well," she said before she could reconsider, "nothing says I can't go to the dance anyway." His smile broadened, reaching his eyes. "I would be honored, Miss Evans." By the time they led their horses back down to where the crowd waited, Dakota realized something had shifted between them. What had begun as a challenge had somehow transformed into something else entirely, something that made her both nervous and exhilarated, like the moment before a difficult jump. Word of Dakota's victory spread quickly through Monticello. By the time she rode into town the next morning to pick up supplies, several people called out congratulations. She accepted them graciously, though her mind was more occupied with thoughts of Remington Quinn and his promised visit to her ranch later that day. She was loading sacks of flour into her wagon when Sheriff Taylor approached. "Quite a race yesterday, Dakota." "Thank you, Sheriff. It was close," he nodded, leaning against her wagon. "Quinn's a good sort. Known him years back when he was working in Colorado." Dakota's interest piqued. "You know him well?" "Well enough. He had some trouble back east, nothing criminal," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Family matter that sent him west. But he's made a name for himself as an honest man, and probably the best horse trainer this side of the Mississippi." Dakota mulled this over as she finished her shopping. Remington Quinn was becoming more intriguing by the minute, and she wasn't sure how she felt about that. She returned to the ranch by midday, helping Hank repair a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent storm. They were just finishing when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Remy rode in on Diablo, leading a pack horse loaded with ropes and other equipment. He tipped his hat as he dismounted. "Miss Evans." "Mr. Quinn," she returned, suddenly conscious of her dusty work clothes and disheveled hair. "Right on time. I always keep my promises." His smile was warm as he began unloading his gear. "Thought we might scout the south pasture first, get a sense of this mustang's patterns." Dakota nodded, appreciating his professional approach. "Let me change horses. Tempest deserves a rest after yesterday." She switched to her sturdy buckskin gelding, Rusty, and within half an hour, they were riding toward the southern boundary of her property. The land opened up here into rolling grassland dotted with juniper trees and the occasional outcropping of red rock. "Tell me about this mustang," Remy said as they rode side by side. Dakota described the magnificent black stallion she'd first spotted 3 months ago. "He leads a small band, 3 mares, and a yearling colt. They come to the spring near the southern fence line almost every evening." "Territorial? Aggressive?" "Cautious more than aggressive. He's smart, keeps his distance, watches for trouble. I've tried setting up snares near the spring, but he always seems to sense them." Remy nodded thoughtfully. "Horses like that, they've survived by their wits. Makes them challenging to catch, but they make the finest mounts once they trust you." They reached a low rise overlooking the spring just as the sun began its westward descent. Remy suggested they dismount and approach on foot to avoid spooking the mustang if he appeared. They settled in a cluster of junipers with a good view of the spring. The waiting gave them time to talk, and Dakota found herself opening up about her parents, the ranch, and her determination to succeed on her own terms. "Most folks around here still think I should sell the ranch and find a husband," she admitted, plucking a stem of grass to twirl between her fingers. "And what do you think?" Remy asked, his eyes on the distant horizon. Dakota considered the question. "I think a woman shouldn't have to choose between independence and companionship." "Why can't I have both?" He turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "No reason you can't, from where I'm sitting." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Before she could respond, he touched her arm lightly and pointed. "There." In the distance, a dark shape had appeared at the tree line. The Mustang stallion emerged cautiously, his head held high as he surveyed the area. Even from this distance, his power and beauty were evident in the proud arch of his neck and the ripple of muscles beneath his glossy coat. "Magnificent," Remy breathed. 3 mares and a gangly yearling followed the stallion into the clearing. The band approached the spring warily, the stallion standing guard while the others drank. "What's your plan?" Dakota whispered. "Not snares or traps," Remy said. "We'll build a small corral near the spring, leave it open with feed inside for a few days, let them get used to it, then gradually work on closing them in." "That could take weeks," Dakota pointed out. Remy smiled. "You can't rush trust, Miss Evans." They watched until the Mustangs departed, then rode back to the ranch as twilight deepened into dusk. At the barn, Remy helped her unsaddle Rusty, their hands occasionally brushing in the close quarters of the stall. "I'll be back tomorrow with lumber for the corral," he said as he prepared to leave. "If that suits you." "It does," Dakota replied, surprised by how much she was looking forward to his return. As promised, Remy arrived the next day with a wagon of lumber. They spent the day building a simple corral near the spring, working well together despite the occasional disagreement about design details. Dakota found herself enjoying his company, his dry humor, and the respect with which he treated her opinions. By week's end, they had established a routine. Remy would arrive mid-morning. They would work on the Mustang project and often share a simple lunch that Dakota packed. In the afternoons, they would watch from their hiding place as the Mustang band cautiously investigated the open corral, gradually growing more comfortable with its presence. During these quiet observation periods, they talked. Dakota learned that Remy had indeed been a successful horse trainer in Kentucky before a family tragedy. The death of his young wife in childbirth 3 years earlier had sent him west seeking a fresh start. "I'm sorry," Dakota said softly when he shared this. "That's a terrible loss." Remy nodded, his eyes on the distant Mustangs. "It was. For a long time, I wasn't sure I'd find my way back to living rather than just existing." He glanced at her. "The West has a way of healing broken things, though." Dakota understood this deeply. After her parents died, it had been the demands of the ranch, the rhythm of the seasons, and the vast, open spaces that had gradually mended her grief. 2 weeks into their project, the Mustang band had grown accustomed enough to the corral to enter it regularly for the feed they left. Remy declared it time for the next phase. "Tomorrow," he said as they rode back to the ranch house one evening, "we'll set up the trigger mechanism for the gate. With luck, we might have your Mustang by tomorrow night." Dakota felt a mixture of excitement and something like regret. Once the Mustang was caught, Remy's obligation to her would be fulfilled. The thought left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. At the barn, they dismounted and began caring for their horses. The familiar tasks were carried out in comfortable silence until Remy spoke. "I've been meaning to ask you something, Dakota." It was the first time he had used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Yes?" she prompted when he didn't continue immediately. He leaned against the stall door, studying her face in the lantern light. "That Founder's Day dance is this Saturday. I know our wager means I have no claim on your company, but I'd still be honored if you'd consider attending with me." Dakota's heart quickened. "I thought I already agreed to that," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "You mentioned you might go. I'm asking properly now." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "Would you do me the honor of accompanying me to the dance, Dakota Evans?" The formal request, coupled with the warmth in his eyes, made it impossible for her to do anything but nod. "I would like that very much, Remington Quinn." His smile in response lit his entire face. "Then it's settled. I'll pick you up at 6 on Saturday." After he left, Dakota found herself standing in the yard longer than necessary, watching the dust trail of his departure fade in the gathering darkness. Something was happening between them, something she hadn't expected when she accepted his challenge to race. For the first time since her parents' deaths, Dakota was allowing herself to imagine a future that included someone else, not as a replacement for her dreams, but as a partner in them. The next day dawned with clear skies and a sense of anticipation. Remy arrived earlier than usual, bringing additional ropes and equipment for catching the Mustang once the corral trap was sprung. They worked efficiently, setting up a tripwire mechanism that would close and secure the gate once the entire band was inside the corral. By mid-afternoon, everything was ready. They settled into their hiding place to wait, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough not to spook the approaching horses. "What will you name him?" Remy asked softly as they waited. Dakota considered. "Freedom, maybe, or Midnight for his color." "Both good names," Remy agreed. "Though sometimes you have to meet a horse properly before you know what to call him." The sun began its westward descent, painting the landscape in gold and amber. Just as the shadows lengthened, the Mustang band appeared at the edge of the clearing. The stallion approached cautiously as always, testing the air and surveying the area before allowing his band to move toward the corral. Dakota and Remy watched in tense silence as the mares and yearling entered the corral, heading straight for the feed. The stallion remained outside longer, circling the structure, his nostrils flaring as he assessed for danger. "Come on," Dakota whispered. "It's safe. Go in." As if hearing her encouragement, the stallion finally entered the corral, joining his band at the feed trough. Remy's hand found hers, squeezing gently in shared excitement. They waited, barely breathing, as the last mare moved across the tripwire. With a sudden snap, the gate swung shut, the latch falling into place with a decisive click. The reaction was immediate. The Mustang stallion whirled, charging toward the closed gate. The mares circled nervously, the yearling pressing close to its mother. "Now," Remy said, rising from their hiding place. They approached slowly, deliberately, making no sudden movements. The stallion reared at their approach, his front hooves pawing the air in defiance. "Easy," Remy called in a soothing voice. "Easy there, big fellow." Dakota watched in admiration as Remy slowly entered the corral, his movements fluid and unthreatening. He began speaking in a low, constant tone, not approaching the stallion directly, but establishing his presence. For over an hour, Remy worked patiently, gradually decreasing the distance between himself and the nervous Mustang. Dakota remained outside the corral, ready to assist if needed, but recognizing that too many people would only increase the horse's anxiety. As dusk deepened into evening, Remy finally managed to loop a soft rope around the stallion's neck. The horse resisted at first, pulling back and snorting in alarm, but Remy's calm persistence eventually prevailed. "There we go," he murmured. "That's a good boy." Dakota opened a smaller adjoining corral, and with remarkable skill, Remy guided the stallion into it, separating him from the mares. They decided to leave the mares and yearling in the larger enclosure overnight, giving everyone time to calm down before attempting to move them to the ranch. By the time they secured everything and mounted their own horses to return to the ranch, night had fully fallen. They rode side by side under a canopy of stars, the success of the day creating a pleasant buzz of satisfaction between them. "You were amazing with him," Dakota said, genuine admiration in her voice. "He's going to be a challenge," Remy replied, "but the best ones always are." Something in his tone made her wonder if he was still talking about the horse. Their eyes met briefly in the moonlight, before Dakota looked away, suddenly conscious of the quickening of her pulse. At the ranch house they dismounted, both tired but exhilarated by the day's success. Dakota invited Remy in for coffee, and he accepted with a grateful smile. The kitchen was warm and welcoming after the cool night air. Dakota busied herself with the coffee pot while Remy removed his hat and jacket, making himself comfortable at the small wooden table. "I've been thinking," Dakota said as she placed 2 steaming mugs on the table and sat across from him. "About the Mustang." "And," Remy prompted, wrapping his hands around the warm mug, "I'd like you to train him. Properly, I mean. I'll pay you, of course." Remy looked surprised. "That wasn't part of our arrangement." "I know, but I've seen how you work with horses. I want this one done right." She took a sip of her coffee, gathering courage. "Besides, it would mean you'd be around a bit longer." The admission hung in the air between them. Remy's eyes softened as he studied her face. "Is that something you'd want, Dakota? Me being around longer?" She met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it is." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Then I accept, both the job and the reason behind it." The touch of his hand on hers sent warmth spreading up her arm. For a long moment they sat in comfortable silence, the connection between them strengthening with each passing second. When Remy finally stood to leave, there was a reluctance to his movements. At the door, he turned to her, his expression serious. "Saturday," he said. "The dance." Dakota nodded. "I'll be ready." He hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Good night, Dakota." The spot where his lips had touched her skin tingled long after he'd ridden away into the night. Saturday arrived with a flurry of activity. Dakota spent the morning helping Remy transport the Mustang and the mares to the ranch corrals, a challenging task that required all their combined skill and patience. By early afternoon, the horses were settled, and Dakota found herself facing an unexpected dilemma: what to wear to the dance. It had been years since she'd attended a social function as anything other than the independent rancher Dakota Evans. The idea of going as Remy Quinn's date, for that's what it was, she acknowledged to herself, called for something different. She rummaged through her trunk, finally pulling out a dress her mother had made for her 19th birthday. The deep blue fabric complemented her auburn hair, and though the style was a few years old, it was still presentable. She shook out the wrinkles and hung it by the window to air. A knock at the door startled her from her preparations. Opening it, she found Mrs. Paulson, her nearest neighbor, standing on the porch with a basket over her arm. "Good afternoon, Dakota," the older woman greeted her. "I brought over those preserve jars I promised." "Thank you, Mrs. Paulson. Please come in." Dakota welcomed her into the kitchen, setting a kettle on for tea. Mrs. Paulson's eyes fell on the blue dress hanging by the window. "Are you attending the Founders' Day dance tonight?" "I am," Dakota confirmed, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. A knowing smile spread across Mrs. Paulson's kind face. "With Remington Quinn, I presume. The whole town's talking about your mustang chase," Dakota sighed. Small-town gossip traveled faster than wildfire. "Yes, he invited me," Mrs. Paulson nodded approvingly. "He seems a fine man. My Thomas says he's never seen anyone handle horses the way Quinn does." As they shared tea, Mrs. Paulson offered to help Dakota prepare for the evening. "It's been a while since you've had a woman's touch around here," she said gently. Dakota accepted gratefully. After the older woman left, promising to return in a few hours, Dakota finished her chores with nervous energy. The prospect of the evening ahead filled her with both excitement and trepidation. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to think of anything beyond the ranch and her independence. True to her word, Mrs. Paulson returned in the late afternoon, bringing her curling irons and a small box of cosmetics. "Nothing dramatic," she assured Dakota, "just enough to highlight your natural beauty." Under her neighbor's skillful hands, Dakota's usual practical appearance transformed. Her chestnut hair was arranged in soft curls that framed her face, with the rest pinned up elegantly at the back of her head. The blue dress, once donned, revealed itself to be more flattering than she remembered, accentuating her slim waist and the feminine curves she usually concealed under practical work clothes. "There," Mrs. Paulson said with satisfaction, stepping back to survey her work. "Remington Quinn won't know what hit him." Dakota hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't just the capable rancher, but someone softer, more vulnerable, yet still unmistakably herself. As 6 o'clock approached, her nerves intensified. She paced the front room, adjusting and readjusting the cameo brooch at her throat, her mother's, worn on special occasions. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart leap. She moved to the window, watching as Remy rode into the yard. He had traded his usual work clothes for a clean white shirt, dark vest, and newer pants. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. Even from a distance, the transformation was striking. He dismounted and secured his horse, then approached the house with a purposeful stride. At his knock, Dakota took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one final time, and opened the door. The expression that crossed Remy's face as he beheld her was worth every minute of preparation. His eyes widened, his lips parting slightly in clear admiration. "Dakota," he said, his voice lower than usual. "You look—" "I don't have the words." "Thank you," she replied softly. "You clean up pretty well yourself. Mr. Quinn?" He offered his arm with a smile. "Shall we?" Monticello's town hall had been transformed for the Founders' Day celebration. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the polished wooden floor. A small band played in the corner, and tables along one wall held refreshments and punch. Their entrance caused a stir. Dakota was accustomed to attention in town, but not this kind, not the appreciative glances and knowing smiles. Remy seemed oblivious to the scrutiny, his attention focused entirely on her as he guided her through the room with a hand at the small of her back. Several people approached to greet them. conversations flowing more easily than Dakota had expected. Remy was charming and attentive, making sure she was comfortable and included in every interaction. When the band struck up a waltz, he turned to her with a questioning look. "Would you do me the honor, Miss Evans?" Dakota hadn't danced in years, but she nodded, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. His hand was warm at her waist, his other enveloping hers as they began to move to the music. "I should warn you," she murmured. "I'm much better on horseback than on a dance floor." Remy's laugh was low and intimate. "Just follow my lead. It's not so different from riding, it's all about trust and rhythm." And indeed, as they moved together, Dakota found herself relaxing into the dance. Remy was a skilled partner, guiding her through the steps with confidence. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, moving in harmony as the music swelled around them. "Everyone's watching us," Dakota observed as they turned. "Let them," Remy replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "I only care about one person's opinion tonight." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. There was no mistaking his meaning or the emotion behind it. Something profound was developing between them, something neither had anticipated when they'd agreed to that fateful race. They danced several more times, interspersed with conversations and refreshments. As the evening progressed, Dakota found herself drawn more and more to Remy's quiet strength and genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. During a break in the dancing, they stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. They walked a little way from the hall, the sounds of music and laughter fading behind them. "I never thanked you properly," Dakota said as they paused beneath an old oak tree. "For what?" Remy asked. "For challenging me to that race, for seeing me as someone worth competing with, not just a curiosity or a woman who doesn't know her place." Remy turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "From the moment I heard about you in town, I knew you were exceptional, Dakota Evans. The race just confirmed what I already suspected." "And what was that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met." He stepped closer, one hand rising to gently touch her cheek. "And that I'd be a fool not to try to win your heart, even if I lost the race." Dakota's pulse quickened as he leaned toward her, his intention clear. She tilted her face up to his, closing her eyes as his lips met hers in a tender kiss. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, awakening feelings she had long kept dormant. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Dakota felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world. The independence she had guarded so fiercely no longer seemed threatened by the possibility of letting someone in, at least, not someone like Remington Quinn. "I should get you home," Remy said softly, though his arms remained around her. "It's getting late." The ride back to her ranch was quiet, both of them absorbed in their thoughts and the new awareness between them. At her door, Remy helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for tonight," Dakota said, looking up at him in the porch lamplight. "The pleasure was mine," he replied. He brushed a curl from her forehead, his touch gentle. "I'll be by tomorrow to work with the Mustang, if that's all right." She nodded, reluctant to see him go, but understanding the propriety of the situation. "Good night, Remy." He kissed her once more, briefly but with unmistakable promise, then mounted his horse and rode away. Dakota watched until he disappeared into the darkness, her mind awhirl with possibilities she had never before allowed herself to consider. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to Dakota's life. Remy came daily to work with the Mustang stallion, whom they had named Midnight after all. True to Remy's prediction, the horse was challenging, but showed remarkable intelligence and potential. Their working relationship evolved alongside their personal one. They still disagreed occasionally on matters of horse training or ranch management, but these disagreements were now interspersed with shared laughter, quiet conversations, and increasingly frequent moments of tenderness. One evening, about a month after the Founders' Day dance, they sat together on Dakota's porch after a long day of ranch work. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a spectacular end to a satisfying day. Midnight had finally accepted a saddle without protest, a significant milestone in his training. "You've worked wonders with him," Dakota said, watching as the mustang grazed peacefully in the nearby corral. "I never thought he'd come this far so quickly." Remy smiled, his arm resting comfortably around her shoulders. He just needed patience and consistency. And a reason to trust. Dakota leaned into his embrace, enjoying the solid warmth of him beside her. Over the past weeks, she'd come to rely on his presence, his steady support, and his unwavering respect for her independence, even as their feelings for each other deepened. "I've been thinking," Remy said after a comfortable silence, "about the future." Something in his tone made Dakota sit up straighter. "What about it?" He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Dakota Evans. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you in Willard's store, standing there so confident and beautiful." The declaration, though not entirely unexpected given the direction of their relationship, still made her heart race. "Remy," he continued before she could respond, "I know how much this ranch means to you. Your independence, everything you've built here, I would never ask you to give that up." She squeezed his hands, emotion tightening her throat. "I love you too, Remy. These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember." Relief and joy spread across his face. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, holding it out to her. It was a ring, a simple silver band, set with a modest sapphire that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "It was my mother's," he explained softly. "Dakota Evans, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not to change who you are or what you've built, but to create something new together?" Dakota looked from the ring to his face, seeing in his eyes everything she needed to know. He wasn't asking her to diminish herself or surrender her dreams. He was offering partnership, respect, and a love that would let her remain exactly who she was while no longer facing life's challenges alone. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened. "Yes, Remington Quinn, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of shared adventures. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Monticello. Most townspeople responded with genuine pleasure, though a few old-timers grumbled good-naturedly about Dakota Evans finally being tamed. Those comments ceased abruptly when they witnessed the couple working together on the ranch, clearly equal partners in every sense. They planned a simple wedding for the following month. Dakota was not one for elaborate ceremonies, and Remy was happy to accommodate her wishes. Mrs. Paulson helped her fashion a wedding dress from fine cream-colored fabric ordered specially from Salt Lake City, while Hank and the other ranch hands prepared the property for the celebration. The day before the wedding, Dakota rode out alone to the ridge where their race had ended months before. She needed this moment of solitude to reflect on the journey that had brought her here, to the threshold of a new chapter in her life. The view from the ridge was spectacular. Her ranch spread out below, the buildings she and her parents had built, the land they had loved. In the distance, she could see the south pasture, where midnight had once run wild and free. The sound of hoofbeats behind her announced Remy's arrival. He dismounted and came to stand beside her, respecting her contemplative mood. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly after a moment. She turned to him with a smile. "Not for a second. Just appreciating how much can change in the space of a few months." He nodded, understanding. "When I challenged you to that race, I never imagined we'd end up here." "Did you really think you could win?" she teased, the familiar banner comfortable between them. Remy laughed, the sound carrying across the open landscape. "I hoped to make it close enough to impress you. Winning your heart was always the real prize." Dakota leaned against him, his arm automatically encircling her waist. "I'm glad you lost," she murmured. "It was a much better beginning to our story." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Dakota stood in her bedroom. Ms. Paulson, helping with the final adjustments to her dress. The cream-colored fabric fell in simple, elegant lines, adorned only with a bit of lace at the collar and cuffs practical yet feminine, much like Dakota herself. Her hair was arranged in the same soft style she'd worn to the Founders' Day dance, with wildflowers woven through the curls instead of pins. Her mother's cameo adorned her throat, connecting past to present on this momentous day. A knock at the door announced Sheriff Taylor, who had agreed to escort her in place of her father. His eyes widened appreciatively as she emerged from her room. "You look beautiful, Dakota," he said, offering his arm. "Your parents would be mighty proud today." The ceremony took place in the front yard of the ranch house, beneath an arch of juniper branches and wildflowers. Nearly everyone from Monticello had made the journey to witness the union of two people who had become an integral part of their community. Remy waited beneath the arch, handsome in a new suit, his face lighting up as Dakota appeared on Sheriff Taylor's arm. The look in his eyes as she walked toward him, love, admiration, and unwavering respect, confirmed everything she needed to know about the decision she was making. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged simple vows and rings, promising to honor each other's independence while building a life together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Remy's kiss was tender and reverent, sealing their commitment before friends and neighbors. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables laden with food, music from a local fiddle player, and plenty of good cheer marked the occasion. Dakota and Remy moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes with genuine gratitude. As twilight descended, Remy found Dakota watching midnight in the corral, the mustang now comfortable enough to approach the fence for an apple from her hand. "Mrs. Quinn," Remy said softly, coming to stand beside her. "How does it sound?" Dakota considered the new name. "It sounds right," she decided, turning to him with a smile. "Though I might keep Evans for ranch business. Folks around here know that name." "Dakota Evans Quinn," he nodded. "Strong name for a remarkable woman." Later, after the guests had departed and the ranch was quiet once more, they stood together on the porch of what was now their home. The future stretched before them, not without challenges, but rich with promise. "Race you to the ridge tomorrow morning?" Dakota suggested, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Remy laughed, pulling her close. "Haven't you beaten me enough, woman?" She smiled against his shoulder. "I'll give you a head start." "I don't need charity," he protested, feigning offense. "Besides, I've already won the most important race." "And what race is that?" she asked, looking up at him. "The one for your heart," he said simply, before lowering his lips to hers. 5 years later, Dakota stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Remy led their 4-year-old son, Thomas, around the corral on a gentle pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, sat on Dakota's hip, clapping her small hands in delight at her brother's riding lesson. The ranch had prospered under their joint management. Remy's reputation as a horse trainer had brought new business and opportunities, while Dakota's practical knowledge of cattle and land management had expanded their operations. Together, they had created something neither could have accomplished alone. Midnight grazed peacefully in the nearby pasture, now fully trained in one of their most valuable breeding stallions. The wild spirit that had once made him so difficult to capture had been channeled into his work, much like Dakota's own independent nature had found expression in her partnership with Remy. "Look, Mama, I'm riding," Thomas called proudly, as Remy led the pony in a circle. "You certainly are, little man," Dakota called back, her heart full at the sight of her son's joy and her husband's patient guidance. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Dakota and Remy sat together on the porch swing, a nightly ritual that gave them time to connect after busy days. "I got a letter from that rancher in Wyoming," Remy said, his arm around her shoulders. "He wants to bring 3 horses for training next month. Says he heard we're the best in the territory." "We are," Dakota agreed with a smile. "Though I think your reputation does most of the work." He shook his head. "It's our reputation, Dakota. No one handles the business side like you do." She leaned against him, grateful for the life they had built. "Do you ever think about that race? The one that started everything?" Remy chuckled. "Only every time you outride me, which is still most days." "I was so determined to win," Dakota mused. "I had no idea what winning would really mean." "And what did it mean?" Remy asked, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. Dakota looked toward the house where their children slept, then to the prosperous ranch spread out before them, and finally to the man beside her who had never once asked her to be less than she was. "It meant finding someone who didn't want to tame me," she said, "just someone who wanted to run alongside me." Remy tightened his arm around her shoulders. "Always, Dakota, for as long as you'll have me." "That would be forever, Mr. Quinn," she replied, turning her face up for his kiss. As the stars appeared in the vast Utah sky, Dakota reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had never surrendered the independence that defined her, but had instead found strength in sharing her life with someone who valued that very quality. The woman who could outride any man in the territory had finally met the one man who hadn't wanted to win against her, just win her heart. And in that most important race, they had both emerged victorious.